they loved this city so much, and they were thankful for the support they had gotten from Fort Worth, and they were thankful for the support they'd gotten from the individuals who ordered boots, and they were happy to make those boots, and I feel like they just wanted to give back.
You guys, we have a returner to the podcast. I want to give you a huge resume of who Nancie is. But before we do that, I don't know if you remember our Christmas episode from last season. If you don't remember it, check it out because it was so fun. Miss Nancie taught us how to wrap a Christmas present, and she's back on the podcast. Nancie, thank you for being here today.
Thank you.
Nancie is over our archive department, and she has a story to tell. And I thought, what better way to celebrate our 145 years than to get Nancie on to talk about the history of Justin. You guys are in for a treat because this lady knows her stuff. She started out in customer service here at Justin 30 years ago, Nancie?
30 years.
Okay, 30 years ago. And she's lived to tell the tells in terms of lots of callers called in with the craziest stories, the coolest stories, the best questions. I mean, you guys out there listening, you understand our brand probably more than we do at times, and you're able to help shift which direction we go. And so as Nancie's here, we get to talk about a little bit of our past, a blast from the past, as you will, as we kind of walk through the past 145 years of Justin. And I've got to say, I'm kind of getting chills in this moment, Nancie, talking about this and talking to you about this because this has been a long time coming, and the history of the company in itself is much larger than myself. It's much larger than you. It's much larger than most of the people, everyone here. And so I just am so appreciative that you took the time to tell us a little bit about Justin. So without further ado, I want to get started with this interview. I want to start with you first, though. If you've listened to the podcast for a while, you know that I'm really interested in the background of our guests and how they got here. So Nancie, think back 30 years ago. What was Justin like? What was it like working in customer service? And then my next question past that is, would you have ever thought you would have ended up in the archives?
No, I did not think that at all. When I came to work here, it was very, very busy. It was before we had such an easy way to key in our own orders. We wrote the orders up. We sent them to order entry to be entered for us. But the phone was ringing constantly. We never had a chance to put the phone down, especially at Christmas. It was so busy, and I loved being busy. It was very different, and it was a lot to learn for me.
I bet it was. And even kind of thinking about that time, even now, customer service gets to email back and forth, but email wasn't a thing.
No.
You had to quite literally talk to every single person. Did that ever get exhausting? Did you ever have days when you're just like, I'm having a bad day? Because you really can't have a bad day in customer service, you know?
No, you really can't. You have to be a friend to everybody, and you do become friends with everybody. I've become friends with so many people over the years. The retailers that would call to order boots, after talking to them for so long, they become a part of your family and is certainly a good friend.
They really do. And I'm so glad you brought that up because we have kind of two departments of customer service, and most companies do. So I feel like that's no secret. There's the consumer facing side, and then there's also the B2B side where you're speaking directly to the sales reps, you're speaking directly to the retailers, and that's how our business is ran. Mm-hmm. And I love the family aspect of it because over your 30 years, not only have you become a family member of Justin and all the employees here, but you've actually gotten that real life experience and gotten to see the cool stories. And we actually, stay tuned for the end of this video. We're going to talk about some of the funny things that Nancie's heard over the years. She just teased one before we got started. And boy, let me tell you, there are some crazies out there. You guys are some of them, but that's okay. We still love you anyway. And we're going to kind of jump right on into the history of Justin because the Justin family, their whole family had a passion for boots. And it wasn't just about the boots. It was about the story behind the boots, the passion for making the boots, and then also the passion for giving back to their communities. And so let's kind of take a step back 145 years ago, before either one of us were born. Tell us about how it all began with H.J. Justin. What do we need to know about H.J. Justin?
He was 20 years old and lived in Lafayette, Indiana. His father was a cigar maker. He saw no use for rolling cigars. He wanted to leave. He wanted to break away from there was a lot of children, and I think he felt like also, from Mr. Justin Jr. had said that there were so many children, he was old enough to get out on his own and make his own way and give room for the other children to grow and to be fed, actually. So he got a train and made it to Gainesville, Texas in 1879. He was 20 years old in just a few months. When he got off the train in Gainesville, he acquired a job working for two sisters who had inherited a shoe shop repair from their father, who had been passed away. So he worked there about 2 years as an apprentice, learning how to repair the boots. And he kind of got itchy. He just felt like that wasn't what he wanted to do forever. He had heard about Spanish Fort, which was not far from there. It was a bustling little town of a population of 200. It had 4 saloons and 5 doctors. So he decided he would go to Spanish Fort and try his luck there. There was a wagon train in Gainesville to pick up a load of whiskey to take to the saloons in Spanish Fort. So he walked up to the driver and said, "I'd like to get a ride to Gainesville, Texas." And the man said, "I am going to Gainesville, Texas. How much money do you have?" And he said, "I have $5.25.
Which in 1879
Was a lot.
was probably like $20 to $40.
Probably so, maybe.
Maybe. Okay.
So the driver said, "Okay, your fare is $5."
So he had 25 cents left over.
He had 25 cents, a hammer, and an awl in his pocket when he boarded that wagon train. But he made it to Spanish Fort and was tired and thirsty and hungry and dirty. He walked into the first place he saw, which was a barber shop. He wanted to get a bath, which you could get a bath there. At that time, you get a bath and get a haircut and get a shave. So he told the barber he was looking to work for someone to pay for a haircut, a bath, and a shave. So the barber said, "Well, sweep my floors." And Joe Justin actually swept the floors and became quite apt at it and did a lot of work that first day. So he was hired full-time to sweep the floors and do odd jobs around the barber shop.
And I think it's really interesting, Nancie. He started with, let's say, $5.25. He paid the $5. He's now got 25 cents, not enough to get a bath and a shave and a haircut. So he swept floors. And then I would imagine he kind of built some kind of relationship with this man that gave him money. So I think eventually he had to have a loan of some sort, right?
He did. But as the Cowboys came in for a haircut and a shave, he noticed how ragged their boots were. So he offered to repair the boots, patch them up. So he started patching boots. It was another income for him. He patched the boots. And then he still didn't want to patch boots all of his life. So he said he just had to have some money. He wanted to borrow some money to buy some skins and buy a fine pair of boots. So the barber said he had $35 to his name, but he could have that to buy skins. So he took the money and started making the boots immediately. The first pair went to the barbershop owner, Mr. Frank C. It cost $9 a pair.
Wow.
He sold the rest of them to some of the other shop owners around there. And that began his business of boot making. One day, he said a hired hand from one of the shop owners came in, and he said, "I want a pair of boots exactly like Mr. Morris's. I want them high with red tops and good work in them." So Mr. Justin said the hand's feet were as long as his arm and as round as a ham.
Which is so hard to believe. I can't help but laugh when I read that. Yeah.
I know. So someone said, "Well, how are you going to turn that leather? You work in a 2x2 lean-to." And he said, "Well, I'll take them outside and cut the leather and work on them out there when it's not raining." So the farmhand was very happy with his pair of boots also.
That is so wild to me. And it's kind of some foreshadowing that I'm sure he didn't even plan, because I know that he just used the resources that he had, but being the red color and then translating that to today's Justin Red, the iconic Justin Red that everyone sees. I think that's something cool to note too, because it was probably just based on what he had, right? But then, okay, so I remember you saying a story about he eventually needed more leathers. He needed more money for more leathers. And so he borrowed $35.
He borrowed $35
from Mr. C, right?
Mr. C,
the barbershop owner.
Correct.
And that was for more leathers.
Yes, it was for leather, for skins to make the boots.
Wow.
So he made several pair there in Spanish Fort and became quite popular. The cowboys from the saloon, where they always heard the gossip, was they'd come into the barber shop and say, ask for that boy that does odd jobs and claims to be a good cobbler. So that's how he really actually started cobbling the boots, repairing them, patching them, and then cutting out the leather and making them by hand. Everything was by hand.
Wow. And something to note there is he kind of was self-taught. He had to figure it out. I mean, going from being having a cigar maker as a father to going out on his own and figuring it out. I can't help but imagine. I don't know if you've ever stopped to think about what that would have been like if he had to throw away a few pairs of boots because they didn't work, or, just getting the shape and stuff. That would be incredibly hard. So,
and years ago, he was the first one, of course, to have stitching on the shaft of the boot, the upper part, because after a while the boots would just kind of sag down and wrinkle. But he started making stitches in the shaft so it would hold them up more.
Which is so unique. The creator of all of that.
Yes, they were made with very heavy leather also. It was a tanning process, and it was very heavy leather, and it would protect their legs as they rode through the brambles and the bushes and the water and things like that.
That's right. And got through all kinds of, wars, all of it. And they were, correct me if I'm wrong, they were a little bit taller tops than probably even today.
Yes, another reason to protect their legs.
Yeah. That's so crazy to think that we've evolved from a true need to now you have fashion boots, you have Western boots, you have work boots, you have all the things, but it all derived from he saw a need, and he had a talent, and he made it happen.
Yes, he did.
And that's kind of a cool overcomer story, I think, of like he could have gone the different route for that time and worked in like the coal mining places, or he could have made one wrong decision and ended up entertaining in bars or something, which is, that's neither here nor there, but everything had to work out exactly the way that it did.
Yes.
So that we would be sitting here today.
True.
Isn't that wild to think about?
It is very wild.
And even in the beginning, I know here in a little bit we'll get to talk about his love life and how he created his family and how that moves on. But before we do that, I've got to have one more follow-up, which is going from not knowing to having a plan to then eventually getting his own shop. Have you heard anything about what he had to do like in terms of building his own shop with that lean-to? Have you heard anything else about the details of the physical process of not only being able to make boots, but getting established as a business owner too?
Well, once he started making the boots, he moved to a little bit larger place. I think it was like an 8x5 building, something like that. And it had room for a basket to hold his leather and things like that. So he really thought he was doing quite well at that time. And he said, I have everything here but a sign. So he got a piece of board and somehow engraved with a knife, I'm sure, H.J. Justin Boots, and hung his first sign. I do have a replica of that in the archive department.
You do, and it's a good talking piece whenever guests come in to the archives to talk about it, because we're Justin today, but we were H.J. Justin Boot Company then.
And then Justin and Sons.
Yeah, and then we'll get to the Son part where it was H.J. Justin and Sons. And I think let's just go ahead and dive into there, Nancie, because rumor was, or story goes, Annie was a doctor's
She was
daughter?
a doctor's daughter.
Okay.
In Spanish Fort. And she was known as a Spitfire. The one story I've heard and read from the book about Justin is she had bought herself a new hat and went to church on Sunday. During the next week, she saw a lady of the night walking down the sidewalk, or they didn't have sidewalks back then, but walking down the street, and had on the same hat. And that did not sit well with Annie. So she walked over and proceeded to take the hat off her head, which caused a fight between the ladies. Annie was fined for starting a ruckus on the street and had to pay $5, but she always said that was well worth the money for me. So
I love that. And wow, I have so many things to talk about there, because she kind of set the tone for the Justin women.
Yes.
did not take no for an answer. They paved the way. They were innovators in their lanes, whatever they did. And we get to talk about that in a little bit. But I think that's cool. Right off the bat, HJ found a woman that was able to hold her own, especially in those times, that would take care of herself and then also support him so well. And then something else jumps out at me, the $5 that she got fined $5. He paid $5. It's just like, I like to say sometimes now it feels like every time you go to the store, something's $5. But back then, $5 was a lot of money.
It was a lot of money back then.
Which is so crazy to think about.
Yes. Well, she had caught his eye at a square dance.
Oh.
Yes. And so he really liked her. He thought she was very pretty. So they married, I believe, in 1887. And she was a great help to him.
Wow. And speaking of that being a great help, she started working with him to not patent, but create a fit pattern?
A fit chart.
Okay.
She would work long nights with Mr. Justin, cutting the leather, turning it, trying to get it stitched together. But the cowboys would come in from the trail and stop and order a pair of boots. But they'd have to complete that trail ride, and they couldn't pick them up until their next way through. So she devised a fit chart, which they could mail to their customers. And at that time, even in the early 1900s, they could mail order. They could order their boots by mail. They could mail them to them, which I thought was pretty cool for that time.
It's very cool, especially considering my dad not that long ago, and he feels like it was just yesterday, but it was even longer. He talks about Justin being able you could mail in your order custom boots to an extent.
Yes.
And so I think that's really cool that these two were the innovators of it all.
Yes,
they really set the bar high for the cowboy boot industry, which I respect and love so much. And then that's interesting too. We've got to stop and talk about that because the time that it would take to complete not only a cattle drive, but then the chance to be able to come back through Spanish Fort. What is the time frame there? Do you think it would be months?
I
weeks?
think it was months.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think it was just a couple of weeks.
No.
That was a long trail.
And then to be able to have the boots made and ready to go, that's so crazy to me because, today we can rush a pair of custom boots and make it happen in a smaller amount of time. But if you want that good quality, you do have to wait a little bit. And so I think that's cool that not only did he not have the technology back then, but he was just able to start doing it and then the boots would be ready. I think that's something that we don't stop and think about a lot.
No.
That he really did make their lives easier. You know, he became a part of something that helped their daily lives improve.
That's what he said one time. He said that that little town catered to the cowboys. That was their work in the saddle. And they catered to the cowboys, but there was nothing heavy or protective for their feet and their legs. So that was one of his thoughts when he started making the boots.
He met the need. Yeah. And that's cool. I can't help but think of any old Western movie and just picture that's what Spanish Fort was like. You know, there's a lot of old good cowboy movies, especially with John Wayne. You know, I picture that. So it's cool to go back in time. But you know me, I'm a girl. I'm a hopeless romantic. I can't help but continue to talk about Annie and talk about how everything that she did. And correct me if I'm wrong. You said that they were married in,
1887.
87. Okay. Was that in Spanish Fort or was that in Nocona?
Spanish Fort.
Okay. So let's talk about getting to Nocona then, because a lot of people out there have been following Justin since it was in Nocona. They have that tie to Nocona, Texas. So talk about that. How did the family get there?
They got to Nocona because there'd always been talk about the railroad going through Spanish Fort. But I believe it was 1889, they changed the route. They decided to put it going through Nocona instead of Spanish Fort. And Mr. Justin realized he had to have accessible shipping. Yeah. So they packed up. By this time, they had their first son, which was John Sullivan. So in 1889, they did move to Nocona. They had 6 more children. They had quite a large family.
So 7 total?
7 total children.
Wow, I didn't know
I'm one
that.
of 7. So it's always a happy family when you have siblings to be your friend.
That's true. Yeah, you're never lonely.
That's true. You're never lonely. Sometimes it's fun, but sometimes it's nice to be kind of away and have your quiet time.
Which is probably exactly why the kids were so involved in the boot making process.
Yes.
They got their escape.
Yeah. Well, yes, and they'd go to school all day, but they would go to their dad's shop and work after school, and every one of them could build boots from the ground up.
Wow.
They were all interested in that. They loved making the boots. They all had a job.
That's kind of unique to me too, because nowadays in 2024, everyone talks about homesteading and kind of going back to the roots and teaching your kids different trades. And even going to trade school is becoming more of a trend. And so I think that's cool that they were kind of getting a double education that would help set them up for the future. And then who knows, if they decided to continue the boot making process, they could, or they could be like Joe and not want to make cigars anymore and move on to something else, you know.
That's true.
They had the choice to do that. I think that's really cool.
But the brothers did help in that business. They all worked together, and they each, what I've heard, they each traded jobs and served in each capacity, so they would know what was going on with the business and not be kind of lost in one area.
Ooh. That's interesting with a family business.
Yes.
That way the left hand knows what the right hand's doing.
Exactly.
Yeah, there's a lot to learn there too. So what was it, 1908?
1908 became Justin and Sons Boot Company.
H.J. Justin and Sons Boot
Yes.
Company. And there's also a sign of that because he had to replace his sign with just H.J. Justin. And then you have even a picture of a replica of what the what the building looked like.
Yes.
Were the Sons involved in any of that building or giving it a facelift? No.
By the time I moved to Nocona, if I can remember the book exactly, they first lived in a 2-room house.
Wow.
And
with
over
7 kids?
Well, I think the kids came
Gradually. Okay.
Not all at one time, surely. But they built on slowly. They'd built a room here and a room there. It became a very large house after a while.
Wow.
And in reading the book, I remember also there was he made maybe the smaller house at one time a playroom or a playhouse for all the people. And they had parties there. They were very social in the city or in the town. They loved being social. They had parties all the time.
Wow. And that's really cool to think about because I've heard stories of John and Jane, getting ahead, moving to the future a little bit, John and Jane being entertainers and hosting. And that's just cool. It says a lot about the Justin family.
Yes,
I think
it
I
does.
just put the two and two. I learned that from you right now, but just put 2 and 2 together about that. So that's really cool. And okay, so talking more about the Sons, just really quick. Did they all find their special niche? Did they find? I know you said that they, got to try switch jobs. But was there one? Do you remember anything about one of the Sons was specifically better at stitching or pegging or?
I never heard that one was better than the other. I heard that they all did everything, and there's pictures in archives also of all of them standing and just cutting, and slowly but surely they would get machinery to help them. But it was still so old-fashioned looking to us now.
Yeah.
And I was going, how did they ever learn all that and keep up with all of it?
For real. And be a part of the innovation along the way. That's so mind-boggling to me. Well, Nancie, we're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, you guys, we're going to talk about how Justin Boots moved from Nocona, Texas to Fort Worth, Texas, and everything in between. So stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Okay.
Hi, ladies. Summer is here. And if you're anything like me, you're looking for the perfect summer dress, something that will keep you cool and stylish and also look cute too. So whether you're gearing up for your backyard barbecue, your beach vacation, maybe even a few weddings you have this summer, Justin Boots has you covered with their stunning collection of dresses. And that's right, I said dresses that have a sheer sleeve that the wind blows right through and keeps you nice and breezy so you can look your best when you're going to these events where you're definitely going to sweat. And as a special offer for being a Kick Your Boots Up listener, we'd like to offer you 15% off your next purchase. Just use code KYBU15 at checkout. That's code KYBU15. Hi, everybody, and thanks for listening. You know it's about to get even better. We're going to move on to how Justin and Sons, we can't leave that part out, got to Fort Worth from Nocona, Texas. But one thing I want to touch on before we move on to Fort Worth, because we were just talking during break, Justin became, by this point in time, 20s-ish, we'll say, kind of started to become a household name. Everyone was starting to send word about it. People like Tommy Nix were starting to get boots made. Right. So tell us about that, about Tommy Nix and his partnership with Justin.
Tom Mix was a silent film star that we made boots for. And he was so busy, he would just send telegrams to Mr. Justin and say, make me 2 pair of boots, make me 1 pair of boots, make me, and Mr. Justin would make them as he had expressed how he wanted them made, and then ship them to him. He also made boots for Charlie Russell, who was a famous painter, and started painting the same year Mr. Justin started the boot company, 1879.
Wow.
So I have a picture over there in archives of Charlie supposedly supposed to be helping with cattle, but he was sitting on a hill with paper and pencil. And the word was they didn't get much work out of him because he was always sketching. But he and Mr. Justin became very good friends over the years, and we do have some catalog covers from way back in the 1920s that were a replica of some of the paintings that Charlie Russell did.
I'm so glad you brought up the catalogs because that wasn't something that I was initially planning on talking to you about, Nancie. But personally, in marketing, we are constantly looking for new ideas on how to shape the brand. And every single one of us, not just in marketing, it's in product development, in sales, and customer service, find ourselves going back to, we say back to the archives, but back to those catalogs. We look at the boots like these, that were made. What I'm going to cheat a little bit. This was in 1900.
1900.
In Spanish Fort.
Spanish Fort, Texas.
Wow.
And if you'll notice the pegs, there's wooden pegs on the bottom.
Oh, yes.
They made boots with wooden pegs, and people really prefer the wooden pegs because when it rains or the streets are wet, they don't fall out like the nails would. They swell, and they stay in the boots better. But that was made in 1900 in Spanish Fort.
Wow. And even these pull straps, this is a cool, wow, this is really cool. Made by H.J. Justin in Spanish Fort, Texas, prior to 1900. Wow, that's so cool. But
the pull
tabs, the pull straps here are even a different material, and this was innovative.
Cloth. They were cloth.
For their time. Very, very neat. So sorry to derail the interview just a little bit, but I couldn't help but think about all the history, and that because of the archives department, we were able to document it all.
Yes.
We were able to keep a good, which you are so organized, and everyone appreciates that. And then we'll talk a little bit about Eddie Kelly, the woman before you that preserved the history of the archives. But it's so organized, and the catalogs are really, really, really cool. Maybe we can do an episode sometime about the different eras of the catalogs or something.
We do have some beautiful catalogs.
Yeah, no, and the boots inside too, just how everything's changed. So sorry, derail. I hope you're okay with that. But so we've learned about Justin in Nocona, Texas. We're caught up until now, and even big names have started reaching out to Justin. Their silent films in the 1920s were so big. I love old films, and so it's so true. So it's cool to have Tom Nix. That's awesome. Okay, how did Justin get from Nocona, Texas to Fort Worth, where it is today?
Well, Fort Worth had heard of Justin Boot Company, and they were a booming town, and they were trying to think of a way to get Justin to move to Fort Worth. So they romanced him quite a while, and Mr. Justin decided that, well...
Oh, and sorry, really quick, is this still Joe Justin?
Yes.
Okay.
They decided to move to Fort Worth. It was a much larger population, and the shipping was much better. So they moved to Fort Worth at that time in 1924.
Wow, 1924. Yeah. Okay, so we've kind of covered silent films. It's the roaring 20s now. Perfect time to move to Fort Worth, to a bigger booming town with more shipping options. I mean, if that was a true concern of his, the railroad is huge, was and still is in Fort Worth. So talk to us about the early years then, because now there's, in Fort Worth, depending on who you ask, there's generations of Justins that have kind of ran the town here. We even had a mayor of Fort Worth that we'll get into, but talk about the early, when they first moved here. Anything noteworthy there in Fort Worth?
Well, I think that, of course, everybody was happy to have them here and loved the Justin boots, but Mr. Justin Jr., who was at the helm when I came to work here, had gone to work with his dad since he was 5 years old. And he always said, I want to run this company as a little child. So all the family was working here in Fort Worth, as in Spanish Fort and Nocona, on making the boots.
And that's so crazy because a 5-year-old saying, I want to run a company, that's kind of fun and cute, but it's really, really, I'm sure it meant a lot to HJ that he genuinely wanted to do that and live on the legacy and keep the company going, because in all honesty, let's be honest, had all the sons decided not to be involved, the company probably would have ended there. It probably would have just done what it could, and it ended in Fort Worth, and everyone saddled up and went home, you know? So that's really cool.
Also, in Fort Worth, the third son, Samuel Avis, gave square dance lessons in this building. In this area, as a matter of fact.
Whoa, talk about foreshadowing.
On weekends, they would have square dances, and he would call, and everybody loved to come.
Wow. And okay, so since you talked about the building, we've got to talk about this building. We work here now, and sometimes we're like, oh, this building has character, but we don't really know what that character is. We've heard the stories. So maybe tell our audience the stories. This used to be a boot factory. They used to make boots here.
Yes, it did. When I came to work here, we were all in this building.
Wow.
I was upstairs in the far back corner, and the building I'm in now across the street was the sewing room. I've never seen so many sewing machines and so much whirring and business going on. It was just always constantly busy. Mr. Justin would go over there and check and make sure everything was running properly. And I've heard stories about, by this time, Justin Jr. was at the helm.
Okay.
But he would come downstairs and check a rack of boots, and he was really quite demanding on as far as making good boots.
Quality.
Anything he wanted his name on had to be good. So if he thought they weren't made well, he would have them redo the boots.
Which is so good and so funny. It kind of does showcase that he was like, nope, if we're going to do this, we're going to do it one way, the right way. And I think that's really cool, because that's still kind of how I feel like in El Paso, Texas, in our factory there too. It's very much like
great, yes.
It does not pass unless it's done right the first time and stuff. So that's really cool. And kind of talking about this building too, I think it's really cool for everyone out there to know something that I get chills almost every day when we talk about it or think about it. John Justin Jr.'s office is still right there. It's still preserved. And if those walls could talk, I'm sure they'd have some stories, because it's like that wood paneling, which by this point was probably the 90s when he was here, because there was one other building in Fort Worth, right?
It was on Lake Street. That was the first year or two they were here in Fort Worth. And then they acquired this building, which is much larger, and they had more accommodation here.
Do you know the numbers of like whenever because they first moved to Fort Worth, humble beginnings, they got to get started in Fort Worth. Do you know how many people they hired once they moved to this building, once they expanded?
I'm really not sure about the number of people, but in the very beginning, it wasn't a lot like it is today or when I came to work here.
Wow. Yeah, that's cool too.
Yes.
And I'm sorry, I'm really excited about this. So I skipped the bucket a little bit. I got ahead. Talk about the 50s, because so we went from the Roaring 20s, everything there. They moved to Fort Worth. They've settled in well. 1954, the Justins invented the roper.
Correct.
Talk about that.
Okay, by that time, John Justin Jr., who always said he wanted to run this company but was never asked to run the company, started making Western belts and had his own company, and it became Justin Leather Goods. So
is that when they made purses?
They made purses in the 1920s, but when John Justin started making the belts, they combined the belts and the purses and all leather goods. We had wallets and, all kinds of things that we had for accessories.
Wow. Which is cool because we have that today.
Oh, yes.
So that's full circle.
Yes. The purses is a funny story about this. The purses actually had a lifetime warranty, and they were each shipped with a small mirror and a comb. And the purses were very small, but all hand done and all hand tooled. The designs were hand tooled. But they had a lifetime warranty. And when I was in customer service, I'd get calls saying, well, your boots have a lifetime warranty. And I would try to tell them, no, we don't have a lifetime warranty. If the boots are defective, we will replace them for something of equal value, but they don't have a lifetime warranty. And when I got to searching, the handbags had a lifetime warranty. I would get calls from people saying I found a handbag in my mother or my grandmother's closet or the attic or the basement, and the strap has come loose or the catch is broken, and I would have to find someone that could repair that for them.
Oh, wow, because we weren't doing it at that time.
That's correct.
Wow.
So, but then Mr. Justin Jr. Joined the Navy and had his belt company. But when he joined the Navy, his mother ran the company for him while he was away. And the uncles realized that he was such a smart young man and had done well in his business. When he came back, he was finally asked to take the helm of Justin Boot Company, which is a job he'd ordered since he was a child. So,
which is so funny about timing, right?
That was in 1950. Okay. And in 1954, he did design the roper, which became very, very popular. He designed the roper because at that time, the bull ropers and the cow ropers were allowed to wear ball caps and tennis shoes in the rodeo because the caps didn't get in the way of the rope, and the tennis shoes allowed them to get off the horse very quickly. But they decided then that if they competed, they had to dress with Western attire. So they came to Mr. Justin and said, we can't do our job well in these high-heel boots. So he thought, how can I make a boot that would accommodate them? And going back to the old times, they made shoes during the war to help, because not a lot of boots weren't selling because the men were fighting the war, and so they started making shoes. And when Mr. Justin Jr. took him, he was going to throw away the shoe lasts. And his dad said, don't ever throw anything away. You're going to use that one day. So he kept making several attempts to make a boot that would accommodate the bulldoggers and the bull ropers. And he remembered the shoe last. So he went to this basement and pulled the last out and made it on the shoe last, and then just raised the upper or the shaft to 11 inches. And that worked fine for them to do their job in. They were very pleased with that. But not only that, the ropers became so popular, and he introduced many, many colors, so many colors in ropers. They were such great sellers, and everybody loved them. And speaking of returning boots, when I first came to Archives, a lady that was a school teacher was very involved in FFA with her children. And when she passed away, her children sent her 25-pair collection of ropers to our archive department.
And those are the ones that we've seen. We've used them for a few events, but we're very cautious of using them. That was the rainbow colors? Yes. There's all kinds of colors.
All colors. We had, so many shades of blue, shades of yellow, shades of green.
That is amazing that someone could have that many colors and that they've kept them so long and preserved them for so well. And I think too, I want to come back to the need of the roper. Mm-hmm. First of all, that's genius and very innovative and ahead of the time. And then to be able to introduce so many colors through the 60s, through the 70s, and even going into the 80s when the colors were vibrant and everyone was just fun. And that was such a good moment. But the round toe specifically, going back to the need of the roper, the round toe specifically did make it easier for the calf ropers to get out of their stirrups. And it was such a need and so used and so beneficial then that even today, the ropers still use the roper boot. And I think that's worth noting too, because I was trying to do the math. I don't know if you saw my face while you were talking, but 70 years of the roper, and it's still one of our best sellers. And it was iconic for its time and innovative and set the tone, but then 70 years later can still hold its own alongside all the new fashion and all the new Western and work and stuff. So I think that's really cool to note as well. Wow. And I actually hadn't picked up on that story where Mr. Justin had said, don't get rid of anything. Mm-hmm. I really respect that. And that is so cool. I think a lot of business owners out there are going to resonate with that story of like, in your humble beginnings, don't waste, because one man's trash right now could be another man's treasure down the line. So I think that's really cool. Personally, I'm like, wow, so cool. Okay. So now that we've gone through the 50s and the ropers, talk to us about the 60s, 70s, all the way up till the 90s. Tell us a little bit about that time period, because now Justin in Fort Worth is booming. John Justin was the mayor of Fort Worth eventually, but I might be getting ahead of myself. Tell me about that. All about that.
Mr. Justin came, of course, to the helm of the boot company and was very involved in everything surrounding our city. He rode in every grand entry in the rodeo from 1950 until he became ill in the late 90s.
Wow.
He was served as city councilman, and then he served as the mayor also, and was did a lot of work for that, worked hard. There was some problems, I think, with the streets and the water getting done correctly for all the streets and then flooding the streets. But he was very, very smart and very helpful with all that during the time. He was well liked by the city council and very well liked as a mayor in Fort Worth.
You can tell just because I was writing a story about Jane Justin, his wife, later on, not that long ago. And the more research I did, the more articles I read about their family, they were so loved and well respected, and everyone looked to them for entertaining and for helping out in times of need that necessarily either the funds weren't there or whatever it was. They were just willing to give back. And I think that's a huge part of them being so well and doing so well in Fort Worth, because while it was a booming city and while they were meeting their needs for shipping and all of the things that check the boxes, they were very human about it.
That's true. And during that time, the Cowboy boot crisis was formed. Okay. Mr. Justin, I have heard that John and Jane Justin would take an injured cowboy into their home and care for him until he was ready to go back on the road into the rodeo circuit. She would cook for them. She was a great cook. She has a cookbook.
She does.
That was out, yes.
Jane Justin's Prescription for Hunger?
Yes.
I think is what it's called. Check it out, guys. It's on Amazon.
But they did that. And the city, I did see one quote that he would be not only remembered by the wonderful boots he made, but by his care and concern for the cowboys.
And that goes on to the Justin Cowboy Crisis Fund, the Justin Sports Medicine Team with Walt Garrison and that involvement. And of course, we've had an episode with Tom Feller, who I feel like those are his passions.
Oh, yes.
And he tells the story so well. But you being from the archives and getting to hear these stories firsthand, what's that like for you, hearing all the impacts he's made and everything that he's done creating those two organizations?
It really increases your pride to work for a company that is so well known and has always been there not only for their family, their employees, but their customers.
Yes, to all of it, even now in 2024. There's so much pride. And that's cool because, Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo, everyone's familiar with it. A lot of people come from all around the United States, even Canada, to compete there, to attend the rodeo, whatever it is. And to you and I, the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo might just be the Fort Worth Stock Show and Rodeo. It's entertaining, it's fun. But to the Justin family, at one point in time, that was their time to shine, per se, in terms of hosting and the hospitality. I mean, talk about the hospitality tent. There was a story there, right, where that's kind of how the hospitality tent even got started at Fort Worth.
I think they put up a tent in on their property, possibly.
I think that's what
and had a huge party, and that set the trend. I mean, they were always inviting people over and having people entertain people. They loved it, and of course, everybody loved the Justins and loved to be invited.
Oh, definitely. And that kind of makes you feel the pride that you mentioned earlier about just working for the company. As a consumer, I was a big fan of Justin, just knowing that too, how involved they were. And even though the employees here that have lived here all their life and they're very strong in Fort Worth, they also have that same pride of like, this is a Fort Worth company, a Fort Worth family, you know? And so I think that's really cool too. But then even, we mentioned how spicy Annie was. So we've got to cover Jane just a little bit. Jane was a legend in her own. And I just researched, and you just helped me research and read and learn about everything that Jane did here in Fort Worth. But I've got to read off a list of things because while Jane was very supportive of the boot company, she supported John Justin Jr. with everything. She also had a few things of her own, though, too. She had the Jane Justin School.
Yes.
And at TCU, they actually got the Jane and John Justin Hall of Fame built for them. There's like on the field or something. They have involvement with the John Justin Wing at Cook's Children's, right? Did I say that right?
Yes.
Okay. And then there's something here about the Fort Worth Museum of Science and History.
Yes.
Involvement there, and the Omni Theater Science Education. There's so many others. And so what do you think for you, what do you think their reasoning was for giving all their time and money and energy to the community? Because they didn't have to. They could be a normal business owner.
A lot of people don't. And I feel like that they loved this city so much, and they were thankful for the support they had gotten from Fort Worth, and they were thankful for the support they'd gotten from the individuals who ordered boots, and they were happy to make those boots. And I feel like they just wanted to give back as much as they could. They were very generous people. They were very nice people to work for. Jane was very active. I give her credit. She was a quieter woman than Annie, very reserved in some aspects, but she was a beautiful woman and a very kind person.
And you've gotten to, I feel like, know her more than anyone just because of her collection of clothing and boots that sit in your archives.
Yes.
Tell us about those.
I have a few outfits that was made for her. They were made for her by a tailor that actually made clothing on sets for the Westerns that I watched in my childhood, Roy Rogers and Gene Autry.
Yes.
And people like that. He would drag his wagon behind his convertible, a big long winged convertible, and make clothing on the set. And he made her some clothing that she wore also to different, like the National Rodeo Finals and things like that. And I do have some of those suits in archives.
You do, and the boots too.
Oh yes,
her collection of boots. I wish you guys could see this. If you're ever in Fort Worth and you do want to come see them, let us know, because I mean, just her closet. You almost get a taste of who she was just based on seeing her outfits on the rack and seeing her boots displayed. You start to kind of paint this picture of, okay, that would have been a lady I would have liked to know and hang out with.
Oh, definitely.
The pink, I remember specifically, there's some pink boots. There's some like lacy looking boots.
There are some lacy. This is an overthrow, I think, of the boots. They would have the leather, then have a topping on that. She had leopard skin boots. She had beautiful, beautiful boots. She had a sister here also. They made a lot of boots for her. I have a lot of boots in archives that I wish I had room to show everything.
I know. Maybe we need to do that. Stay tuned, because there might be an archive video in the near future of just everything that's there, because it's so cool. Like I said, we always tend to go back there and mentally go back there too, of like, okay, what was it like in this time? And I know product development, the team now, they continually go to the archives to talk about stitch patterns. Right. And that's how our rainbow stitching on our vintage boots our vintage collection boots was created. They found it from the archives. And you get to live, I say live there because it's like we're there all the time. You get to live there every day. You get to work there every day in the archives. And so I want to get to know more of your stories and hear from you. So we're going to take a quick break, Nancie. Okay. But when we return, you guys, we're going to get to know all about Nancie's experience in archives, the stories, the fun things she's heard over the years. And I think we're going to get to learn a little bit more about the personality of Justin as a whole. So stay tuned. We'll be right back. I can't believe it. I was just talking to my niece the other day, who's going to be in 4th grade this year. That's also not believable. And she reminded me that school is starting soon. And that kind of got me thinking about my time shopping for back to school. And there were so many good memories wrapped around that with, you know, buying the new shoes, the new backpack, lunchbox, whatever it was. And I just remember the stores being so crazy. So this year, save time, save money, beat the crowd. Go to justinboots.com and use code KYBU15 to receive 15% off your next back to school purchase. That's code KYBU15. Hey, thanks for listening, guys. If you've liked what you heard so far, don't forget to like and subscribe and share this with your friends. I hope you learned something. But now we're going to dig a little bit deeper. We're going to talk about present day and get to know Nancie a little bit more too. So to kind of set you up about present day, we now have been fortunate enough to work with people with the likes of George Strait, Reba McEntire, Jenna Paulette, Dusty Tuckness, Cody Webster. I mean, big names in rodeo, big names in country music, kind of starting with the 90s on tell me about your experience there and Justin's history in that. Do you remember the George Strait partnership or the Reba McEntire partnership coming
Well,
into
George
fruition?
Strait was happening when I was in customer service. Excuse me. So I do remember that. I know our 125th anniversary, the night before the rodeo started, they had the whole arena or the whole Coliseum, and nothing but Justin employees could go. And Justin employees were also trick riding and bull riding and calf roping and the best thing though was George Strait came down from the ceiling and sang happy birthdays.
That is so cool.
He and his son also performed in the rodeo. So
That is awesome. Yeah, I think Bubba and George are both avid team ropers.
yes,
They used to have the George Strait team rope in.
Yes.
No, Nancy, that is awesome. And what a cool night. I mean, I've heard, we've had Tom and Darla both on the podcast before. I've heard them talk about their time and what it was like. And they've even off camera talked about the 125th anniversary with the big old cake and all of that at Fort Worth, Stock Show and Rodeo. That's so cool. And even Reba. Do you remember when Reba first?
I do. I was in archives by that time.
Okay. Because it was, I want to say like 2015, 10?
I'm thinking
was later than the
at least
90s.
15, yeah.
Okay.
At least 15, if not a little bit later than that.
Okay.
I had retired from customer service, and they asked me to come back and work part-time in archives. So I felt the need to stay busy and stay with Justin Boot Company. So
You loved it that much. And that's what I want to get to talk about now is Eddie Kelly, the woman before you,
yes,
kind of helped set the stage in the archives department.
she did.
Tell me about Eddie's personality and who she was.
Eddie Kelly was a quiet woman, but she did a great job with everything she did. She came to work. She had married a man in their service, and they were here at station here in Fort Worth. And she said the marriage didn't last, but the love for Texas did. So she came to a square dance here and fell in love with the company and kept asking for a job, and they wouldn't hire her because she didn't have a in-depth employment history. But she kept asking, and they finally hired her, and she held 3 jobs in the factory. Every time somebody would get sick or go out on maternity leave or quit, she'd say, oh, I'll do that job. And then she was promoted to boot designer. And she had an office in the corner upstairs. And the story I've read about that is she had a sewing machine. She had an idea. She would go to her office, sit down at the sewing machine and stitch a pattern, and then come downstairs and make the boot.
Wow.
So she made beautiful boots as well. She was very, very ahead of her time, I think, in that. But when she retired after 63 years,
That's a long time.
that was a long time to work when they thought at one time that she wouldn't be a valuable employee. But she was here for 63 years, and she worked in archives part-time. And she could tell you, if we had a question from customer service about a boot, oh, that was in the 1976 catalog, or that was in the 1989 catalog. She knew exactly what catalog they were in, and she'd go to that and pull the catalog for us. She could remember everything. She never worked a computer. Everything was by hand, handwritten when I went back there in archives. So, yeah.
Wow.
If she had an individual call and inquire about an old pair of boots, she would have us research it and then bring it to her, and she'd call them back because she didn't know how to work the computer.
She didn't use the computer, which would explain when we were looking at this boot earlier. I don't know if you guys can see this, but this was probably Eddie's handwriting, right? Or is this yours?
No, that's my handwriting.
This is yours. Okay. Well, still, a lot of her notes looked like
Yes.
this. And you passed on her tradition, and I think that's really, really cool. And her continually asking for a job, that says a lot about, I think, the stories that I've heard about her of like, she just didn't really take no for an answer, which is going along the same theme of Annie and Jane and even Enid Justin, along the way, which we forgot to mention. But anyways, yeah, I think that's so cool. And then I would say, Nancy, I don't want to get too sentimental, but you fill the boots really well moving into archives.
Thank
You are the only person I know that's done the archives in my short time here, and it's always fun going to visit with you because I learn a new story every time, and that's just because you're so open and welcoming, and you have a passion to share the story So I appreciate that. And one memory that I want to share really quick about Nancie, you guys, is my first day on the job or first week. Everyone goes to see the archives to figure out the story. And I picked up a pair of presidential boots. I don't remember now. I think it was Trump's boots or maybe even Kennedy's boots. I don't remember what president it was.
LBJ's boots.
Okay. Yes. You know exactly what I'm talking about then. And I'm thinking, wow, this is cool. And next thing you know, you're telling me a story about your husband that used to work in security. So tell me that story about in Fort Worth, the night before an iconic thing in history happened. Talk about it.
My husband was a Fort Worth police officer. And he was the youngest police officer at that time, and he was asked to be the bodyguard for Kennedy in Fort Worth. He was in Fort Worth for a big breakfast the next morning, and he was here the night before. And my husband got to stand outside his room and protect that room all night. And the next morning, he said that Kennedy came to the door and said, "Good job, young man, but my wife isn't quite ready, but if you'll stand here and wait for her and escort her downstairs." Takes her longer to get dressed, but she always looks a lot nicer than I do. So he stayed upstairs. We took him downstairs and came back and stayed outside for Jackie and met her and talked with her and then escorted her downstairs.
And sure enough, that next event that they went to in Dallas was the last time in history.
Horrible.
Very
thing
horrible.
in our history, yes.
Yeah, last time that they would be seen again in public together. And that is so wild, Nancie. I'm telling you, that's what Fort Worth is. It's a hub for all kinds of different stories like this. And that's why you're the perfect one for the archives department. I love it. I always associate that story every time I step into the archives because I'm like, I'll never forget this. And it takes a person like you that cares about it to preserve it. And so I can't help but encourage everyone out there to communicate more with you, get your questions answered. And you're going to hate that I'm saying this because you're like, I'm already busy as it is. I don't need anyone else. But you're using your customer service background to now cater to people that have questions about their boots.
Yes.
Just the other day, this happens every day. If we were to ask Nancie every single day what she does, she would say, "Oh, I just had this happen," or "This person just asked this question." But just the other day, someone from England sent their boots because she had been wearing them for years, and we learned that they were like really old boots.
Yes.
And they finally split down the middle here, which is so beyond crazy to me. So tell us about your experience in the archives then, because you get some crazy stories. Do you remember, what's the craziest story you've ever had about boots?
Are you speaking archive days?
Yeah,
Okay.
archive things.
Well, people call all the time and ask me about how old a boot is it found in their father's or their grandfather's closet, how old it is, what it's made of, how to care for it, how much it's worth. And, of course, I can't set a value on those boots.
They're priceless?
Yeah, they are priceless. I can tell them what they retailed for at the time they were made. But a lot of people, one gentleman I remember he called me several times talking about some sea turtle boots. And sea turtle boots were gorgeous boots. And we don't make those since 1976, I believe.
Wow.
We cannot make them anymore. But he had a pair of boots, and he finally said on his one call, he said, I don't have children. I have no one to leave these boots to. Would you like to have the boots? And I said, I'd love to have the boots, but I can't ship them over the state line. And I probably shouldn't say this, but he said, well, I'll just bring them to you. So I put them in the trunk of his car and drove them from another state here to Fort Worth and presented them to my office.
Wow.
And then the lady you were talking about from England, I had purchased a pair of boots on Etsy. And 5 years ago, she had sent me an email asking how old the boots were and what they were. And they were made in the late 30s or 1940s. And she had bought them on Etsy and worn them for several years. And then she contacted me again and said, these boots finally have a little tear in the very top of the boots, and I'm afraid to have them repaired. So she wanted to send them to me. But there again, I couldn't bring them back from that area. So she was planning a family vacation and going to California. I sent her a call tag to a residence in California to bring the boots back to me, and she mailed them back to me.
Wow.
Yeah.
Just, that's so crazy. You'll have to write that note in there when you store them away. And
I did. I copied all the emails from 5 years ago.
Wow.
And in researching that boot, I found they were made for a importer harness and saddle shop. And I thought, why would his name be on one tag and the Justin name be on the other? But he had a huge store in Taylor, Texas, I believe, which is close to Austin. And apparently he and Mr. Justin had crossed paths, and Mr. Justin made the boots for his Western wear store that he had also opened.
Which is so cool because it's a piece of history that we never knew.
Right.
You know, we didn't get those dots connected.
There's so many things that come through archives. It just, there's so many interesting stories about my father wore these boots, and I've worn them for years. And we have one picture in archives of a man from Mineral Wells, I believe. He had 7 sons and 1 grandson. And he sent a picture of them all, and they all had on boots. And the caption said, "We all wear Justin boots, and the grandbaby will too soon."
That's so true.
Yeah.
We're kind of like a generational brand. And since we're talking about different boots, I've got to bring a few of these up. I'm so thankful that you brought these from the archives today, because what's an episode without a little show and tell?
That's true.
So tell us about these boots. It looks like they were in the 1970s.
Correct. They were made, of course, when the salesman would come to town for a sales meeting, they had to have some entertainment, and they played golf. So we made the salesman golf boots.
And these are slick.
Those were one of the salesmen, as a matter of fact, that worked for us during the 70s.
Wow.
And all the tags you see, I do try to put the date they were made in a short description. So when somebody comes in archives and wants to know what about the boots, they can turn it over.
You can tell them. Like, this is a tricolor iguana.
Yes.
Wow.
Yes.
And I just now noticed this. Whoever wore them, whatever sales rep it was, has some leftover manure or dirt or grass or whatever. And who knows where they went with these boots. And that right there is, like, that's just cool, to keep the history there.
Yes.
Okay, and then
Mr. Justin Jr. had a great personality and a great sense of humor. And he always said, anything you do, you can do better in boots. So he devised the roller skate boots.
these suckers are heavy, let me tell you. I think they're still lighter than the normal traditional roller skate.
Yes.
But 1955, kangaroo. So they're made out of kangaroo. And you guys have probably seen these on our social media before. I think we did like an archives post. We can tag it below as well. But talk about this. I know we've seen some trendy videos on social media lately of like new boot goofing or these funny trends where people have like duct tape or glued roller skate bottoms to boots. But listen, y'all, it's really been done. It really was a thing. Were these made for the public or just for himself?
No, just for. I do believe there's a picture over there with a small child that was competing in some type of roller skate contest, and she had on a pair. But I don't think we've ever made it for the public.
Let me tell you, workout for sure. You can for sure get a workout with these. But very cool. Thank you for bringing them over from the archives,
You're
Nancy.
welcome.
These are just a few. Hopefully I didn't break it. No. These are just a few of the boots that you get to deal with every day. And it might seem mundane to us workers here, but to you guys who haven't gotten to see them for the first time, check out our social media. There's a lot of archival posts that we've had that really kind of help paint the picture. And one day we'll get to do a video. I'm gonna make that a personal goal, and along with our producers behind the cameras here that are now probably not happy that I'm saying this, but of showing everyone what the archives looks like. Because when you picture archives, you think of a museum, and you really do have like a museum. There's a whole room full of boots, floor to ceiling boot boxes, boots. They're labeled. They have so much detail as like who they were from and when you received them. And I think that is so important to preserve even the next 145 years of Justin. So Nancy, thank you. This has been so informative, so fun, and I am so thankful that you took the time to tell us about this.
Thank you for having me. I've enjoyed this also.
And you guys, here's to another 145 years. That's it. We just went through 145 years in this episode of the Kick Your Boots Up podcast. If you liked what you saw, like, subscribe, share this with your friends, but most importantly, comment below and ask your questions. Do you have some boots that you're sitting on from the 1950s? Comment below. We'll pass them along to Nancy. She'll be able to give you all that she knows with her expertise on it all. So thank you guys for listening, and we'll see you the next time you kick your boots up. Thanks for joining us on Kick Your Boots Up. I'm your host, Taylor McAdams, and we can't wait to share the next story of the West.
Until then, feel free to like, subscribe, and leave us a review. Follow us on social media at Justin Boots to keep up with our next episode. And we'll see you the next time you kick your boots up.